Hello, and welcome to Making Sense of It. I'm Mona Duncan, and today's topic is on. I've just been talking with some of our guests that are here today and talking about reading and enjoying it and how, it can just expand your mind. And so I have a tendency to read, but then I'll go back and reread. Put what year I read it to start with, and then read it again and read it again. And I have just recently reread Dr. Glasser's book, The Identity Society. And so I have 10 quotes from him that I'd like to share with you. And those of you that are here uh, will be welcome to make some comments about them, how you see them. So I'm going to share the screen so that you can kind of read along as I am reading on the. So this is from Dr. William Glasser's The Identity Society. And hold on, I'll tell you what year it was written in. But it's very relevant still today. It was written in 1971. Okay, so uh, he was looking primarily at helping people that are not successful but want to be successful to learn how to be successful. And so he looks at schools and learning, and then he just looks at, going into business and so forth like that. So here is quote number one. Given the students, recognition apart from learning rarely occurred to anyone. Dr. Glasser had really been looking at making schools more engaging. Smaller classes and better materials helped some, but they did not get to the core of the problem. And before most students would learn from their teachers and or from their fellow students, they had to have recognition that they were important human beings. And so he was looking at the fact that the person matters. The person matters. So is there any comments on that, or anyone like to tag on to that quote? I'm seeing a couple of heads being shaken.
Yeah, no, I'll jump in. I recently took a course meeting once a month over a year period, and the instructor was very set on imparting the information, not so much recognizing us as learners, but expecting us to put forth from the information that was given us.
Right.
I survived.
So I'm hearing you say there was a palpable difference there in just
Power,
in just receiving information, that it was up to you to make that information important.
right. Right, and to implement the information, although the learners themselves were not involved, it wasn't an interactive type of process. It was, here it is, you take it, implement it, and that's not my style of learning or teaching, I hope.
Yeah. Okay. So here is another quote. I found that people needed involvement as a prerequisite to change. Involvement, therefore, became the cornerstone of reality therapy. If the therapist and patient were not involved, reality therapy did not work. I realized involvement was also a prerequisite to a successful role or identity. Motivation toward worthwhile behavior can reverse their identity from failure to success.
Wow.
So, thoughts? Involvement can change people from failure to success. I was
That's a
speaking.
that's a that's just a very powerful statement. And I'm sitting here processing it on so many levels. That's my comment.
Yeah, yeah. I was speaking with someone just a few days ago that was having difficulty, that had been wounded emotionally by a very important person in their life. And it kind of goes back to, Dr. Glasser's, the ultimate question is what I'm doing, is what I'm saying, is it bringing us together, or driving us apart? And the statement was driving, the person was really, really wounded. And so it's looking at the fact that as we can recognize the fact that, we are a person of worth and value, and that no matter what the other person is saying, there may be some legitimate, it may have hurt, but it may have hurt because it was legitimate.
I'm thinking that, when I'm thinking of that idea that involvement can shift from a failure to a success identity, I'm thinking that what involvement does is it puts more pictures in the quality world, that the individual who's experienced failure can start to see success because there are more pictures in the quality world.
Right, right. Okay, let me bring the screen up and we'll look at another. He says, we have all changed from role precedents more than we realize. The young more than the old, but everyone to some extent. Almost everyone is personally engaged in a search for acceptance as a person rather than as a performer of a task, or rather than as a performer or as a task. Thoughts on that? Okay, go ahead.
Nope, I was just.
Oh, okay. Okay. Here's another quote from Dr. Glasser. All that we do is governed by two factors: our total nervous system and our conscious mind. Our nervous system urges us to protect ourselves and, when we are safe, to enjoy ourselves. Our mind must choose what seems best from the possibilities that we recognize are open to us. When our mind and our nervous system are in harmony, we feel good. When they conflict, as they often do, we suffer. That breaks it right down to the nitty gritty. There's the conscious mind that we're aware of that we're thinking. And of course, we have the creative mind that we're not aware of that we're thinking. We're also conscious of our total nervous system. And
yeah. Well, I'm a strong believer that as we think, our health is. they're very much directly related. That part. And a comment on the one just before, it didn't come to me in time to say it, but you were talking about the involvement. How many times have you've heard people said, or you possibly said it yourself, oh, it's you, I'll do it. Which is direct indication of that quality world picture, Deb, that you said I have of that person and the involvement. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that.
Right. I may not want to, but because you are important to me.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm more apt to do it than I would not have to do it. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so here's another one. Both, and prior to this, he had talked about looking at civilized people and uncivilized people, and now he kind of puts them both together. So both groups, civilized man and primitive man, worked to survive, but with one major difference. Primitive survival man struggled against a hostile natural environment not of his own making. Civilized survival man struggled and struggles against a hostile environment, almost all of his own making. Primitive survival man suffered from lack of food, lack of shelter, lack of ability to make tools and materials to survive, but he got along with his fellow man. Civilized survival man has demonstrated an outstanding ability to utilize the resources of his environment to his own advantage. He has not, however, demonstrated, except for brief periods, an ability to get along with his fellow man. I can almost bring tears to your eyes, or to mine anyway, to realize how that people are so important. And the more we can relate with one another, the more we can get along and not only have a healthy identity for ourselves, but can pass on good things to other people. That whenever we are hurt by someone else, I mean, that there may have been a lot of validity to what they said to us that wounded us emotionally. We think that, ouch, that hurt. Well, there was a point to it. And sometimes it's looking at that point. But any comments on this particular one about the civilized man and the uncivilized, the primitive man?
I have a comment, Mona. When you read and when I'm reading along with you, primitive survival man suffered from lack of food, lack of shelter, etc. I thought of a radio information that I heard the other day on NPR that, the homeless population is increasing and increasingly older in age. And I just thought of the homeless, their lack of food, their lack of shelter, no tools, no materials to survive. And in some cases we're reverting back because we can't or we don't take care of the people that need us most in their later years.
Right. Yeah. But even with all of those neglects, he got along with his fellow man. And
Yeah.
pretty much, that can.
Right. I read somewhere, I believe Dr. Glasser made all of these statements, that he thought that as mankind evolved, that love and belonging and power probably were the first two needs that were there, because one, the people that were able to go out and find the food had the power, the recognition, because they could supply that. But the people that wanted to be with him had to learn to get along and to belong, so that they could use that information. So as the needs were developing, he was saying that those two probably developed maybe side by side or close together.
Right. Yeah. Okay, here's another one. I have concluded that two human qualities are necessary to gain a successful identity: love and worth. First, one must love and be loved to be involved with people whom one cares for and respects. Second, one must do a worthwhile task that increases one's sense of self-worth and usually helps others to do the same. Also, what one chooses that he believes is worthwhile must, sooner or later, be considered of value by someone else. I give you a moment to think on that. Because sometimes, someone comes in with a wonderful idea, but if it's not relevant, it's certainly not going to
Mhm.
become, paramount. And so if we have these outrageous ideas, but there's no tools for it, then the value of that particular
Mhm.
idea fades away. Even if the person with the idea remains a little um, disorganized or not really thinking straight.
All you have to do there is watch a couple of episodes of Shark Tank. People show up with unbelievably creative ideas for a service or a product.
Mhm.
And sometimes the Shark Tank people themselves are bidding against each other because their goal is to make money. And they see the possibility in this idea. And of course, their endorsement enhances the saleability of the idea. And then there are other times they quickly shut down and say, I applaud your creativity, but I don't see a way forward for me. And so for that reason, I'm out. And the people come in with such enthusiasm and passion, and they've committed time to the project. And they're understandably so disappointed that others didn't see it as worthwhile, and they may plug ahead on their own too. But I enjoy it. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I enjoy that too. So here, the need for involvement became built into our nervous system. We learned to suffer because now we could be frustrated by failure to become involved as well as failure to cooperate. Now, love and belonging was built into our nervous system. I think that's real powerful.
I don't know about the rest of you. I'm hearing daily in all aspects of our society the word relationships. The automotive union. We've got people now over in the Middle East trying to negotiate some sort of a thing with Hamas and Israel, and developing relationships with other people so that they can work together. Supervisors on the job with employees, personal relationships. It's just the word is just popping up all the time, and I keep thinking about how I can parlay that, maybe into a workshop or training or something like that. It's got endless possibilities, but you want to get it kind of succinctly expressed, but just everybody's talking about relationships.
Wendell, that's certainly true in the world of K-12 education.
Yes.
And especially in the wake of the pandemic closures from a few years ago. A lot of, but oftentimes a lot of lip service being paid to the importance of relationships, but they never take the next step, which is, okay, exactly how do I manage my behavior so as to increase the likelihood that my relationships with students or my colleagues will improve? So that there's a lot of bowing down to the importance of relationships and not very much in the way of specifics. Well, how do I do this? And that's where I think choice theory has a big advantage, but we need to break through and get it in front of people. So I think you're right.
Yeah. Okay, we'll look at a couple more. thoughts here from Dr. Glasser. This one says, each generation in all societies, large or small, civilized or primitive, learns feelings that seem most effective both for surviving and for staying involved. As children, we learn that when someone frustrates or angers us, we cannot impulsively lash out as the anger feelings may urge us. If we do, we will have little chance for security or success. The thoughtless, impulsive response is unsuited to the cooperation necessary to survive or to succeed in any society, primitive or modern.
And Mona, I don't have the book in front of me. The publishing date for this book was
71.
huh?
1971.
1971. So the way I do math is I say from 71 to the turn of the century is 29 years. And now we're in the 24th year. It's a quick way to do math. So 29 and 24 is 53 years ago. And then then you go back a couple of years from that, the thinking and the putting together of it, 50 years plus, this right on the money thinking, meta thinking, though, not just not even common sense, though, but just it's just astounding. The Glasser truly is one of the people above the crowd, and putting thoughts together that are so relevant over the millennia.
Okay. Therefore, this was this one was 56. Now this is page 57. Therefore, to live successfully with others, we learn to modify our behavior, to respond carefully to the immediate urges of common feelings such as anger. When we cannot express anger directly at the person or situation that angers us, we may hurt someone who did not anger us, kicking the cat, develop a psychosomatic symptom, back pain is very common, or anesthetize the anger through alcohol or drugs. Trying to do something to pacify, and yet it causes so much more problems, not only for others, but especially for self. And it's taking care of yourself. And
So
go ahead.
I have a thought. So when I think of the behavior card in the car in this context, it's like the rear wheels and sitting in the back seat of the car, that we are learning front wheel behaviors and thoughts that help us deal more successfully with the rear wheels signals. And the more aware we are, the more successful we can be. But just behaving based on the physiology and the feelings is so that would be kicking the cat or having back pain or anesthetizing anger through substances.
Yeah.
that likely to get us where we want to go. So that's just a processing I'm doing from that statement.
Yeah.
I regularly, especially in the last 6 months or so, been using the term organized behavior, part of the choice theory loop, on the chart, organized behavior. And Mona's got a significant background working in corrections. And I did 30 workshops in Georgia for the Department of Corrections. And a little phrase I got together as I said, one of the important skills for an inmate or a person on probation anyway, lots of other people, is it's not having a thought, an ugly thought that's working against us. It's putting it into action or saying something. So one of the skills for an inmate is to think whatever thought you've got, but just don't say it. and then they don't get demerits, and they don't get isolation or what have you. And yet you'd think, as simple as that is, that's not an organized behavior that person has. They have the same that Deb was talking about. And so if I start feeling it or thinking it, they just blurt it out, and they'll say things to a corrections officer that gets them detention or loss of privilege. And so, as simple as it sounds, teaching that person to, not say everything that comes into their mind, it helps them get along a whole lot better. And then you start even looking for more positive ways of phrasing things too.
Wendell, similar to that is the practice of writing a letter that you never send.
There you go. Exactly.
I know of people who have done that.
Yeah. A lot of therapists do that one-on-one with people, or maybe in a group too. Write something, maybe read it to the therapist in confidentiality, and then either wad it up, tear it up, burn it up, or store it away.
Yeah.
So it doesn't become part of the public domain. But you're right. That's a way of literally maybe getting it, as we say, off the chest or out of the heart or out of the whatever, out of the nervous system, but doing something with it. That's a very good.
Yeah. I do that. Type it out, write it down. I'll be just how angry, frustrated, what a so-and-so you are, and blah, blah, blah. And then I go back and I read it again. And you know what? I realize, whoa, you didn't know what you were talking about. Because the other part, we don't know. We don't know what we're talking about. And we can get because again, like I said a minute ago, it really hurt. You're just crushed at the time. But you know what? Whenever we look at that arrow that stung us, oh, they had a point to it. Well, yes, it hurt me deeply, but it's an ego thing, not a wisdom heart thing. It's an ego thing. And we can begin to look at that, once we can relate more, relate more, not hanging that. Okay, I got a couple more quotes here, and we'll look at them, and then we'll.
And I was thinking, as you said that, one of our issues is I only had this much information.
Mm-hmm.
And as I get this much information, my thinking about the situation may easily change, and then my feeling about it changes. I'll make this quick. You all have heard this story. I don't know if one of the motivation speakers is like, you're in a hospital waiting room, and here's a man over here, and he's got 4 kids, and the kids are running everywhere, making noise and disrupting and what have you, and it's irritating. And so then it's like, can't he control those kids? And what are you doing? This is so blah 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 blah. And then maybe somebody says something, and the man starts to apologize and say, "I'm sorry, their mother's near death in the emergency room right now. And, you know, oh my God, let me take care of one of the kids for you.
Mhm.
So having a little more information may gather. And so that's a good technique when I found myself being irritated about it. Maybe I can ask for more information, you know, without.
Right. And then as we can grow into the realization that because people are acting out in ways that we're not that comfortable with or approving of, I mean, it's for a reason. And as we can have compassion, just choose rather than to degrade, you know, to see what kind of identity we have for ourselves so that we can pass on a healthy identity to seeing others. That
Right, right. And Dr. Glasser, one of his axiom was that whatever information we receive, we decide how we want to use it. And you all have been talking about lots of different ways to use that information. I can think I need more information. I can think if I write a letter to myself, that will help me manage this, whatever, but all the other things. And so, you know, it's all just goes together, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, and that total behavior card just, you know, once he got that, he could explain all that because he didn't have it at first. And it was the brilliance of him to come up with that model.
right, then we could actually see it.
Right, and understand it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, how utterly simplistic and yet utterly universal and applicable everywhere. I'm saying it just it was the total behavior car was a stroke of genius.
Okay, here's another quote. Here's the last quote, actually. In a circle, the more responsibly we behave, the better we feel. The better we feel, the more responsibly we behave. Now, these are three little things put together in this circle. But because they do not know how to handle anger or frustration effectively by working toward involvement, they find it difficult to get rid of painful feelings. The most common cause of pain is the failure to get involved when we experience which we experience as loneliness.
Glasser has said many times, and people say it in different ways, that especially around schools, that what each youngster needs is a relationship with one, at least one responsible adult. And responsible would have an element of, you know, a caring, empathy, but the responsible adult is not going to let them just run, you know, laissez-faire kind of like this, but a responsible adult relationship. And I mean, I probably said this before, air traffic controllers get literally credited with a save. They discover two things here and Delta 19, turn heading immediately, blah, blah, blah. Wow, that was close, you know. Well, teachers, educators, classroom teachers should be credited with saves all the time. Hundreds, thousands of them. They literally have been the saving grace for a child who didn't come with a repertoire of organized behavior for dealing with situations. And this person hangs in there with them and they get involvement. And then the kid chooses to be more cooperative and then start learning and what have you. And they just literally saved someone probably from going to prison or suicide or hurting others, you know. And it's so simplistic and yet so unbelievably infinite.
And I know that is largely ignored. I know, at least in schools, and I think in society in general. And the reason is, I think, that prevention gets no credit, because when you prevent something, there's no news. We had a young lady years ago transferring into our school system in Connecticut from another town. And she had been expelled because she'd been involved in some kind of street fight or gang thing. And under the rules of Connecticut, if you come into my system and you've already been expelled elsewhere, I don't have to admit you. I honor the expulsion. Well, long story short, we decided to go ahead and admit her. We gave her a 30-day period and brought her back in. She ended up being academically successful. She graduated. She was an athlete. But that story, you know, that if we had admitted her and she had caused uproar in our school or assaulted somebody, that would never have been forgotten. Oh, see, you shouldn't have let her in. That story would be remembered. But when you do something preventative and you take a chance on a kid and it works, nobody remembers. Well, a lot of people don't remember. So we need to tell those kinds of stories that you're describing, because they otherwise get ignored.
There's a fella who, he may be retired now because this may be some 20 years ago or so, but he was like an elementary school principal, Oregon or Washington State. I wish I remembered his name because I like to give credit. And so he said, and he may have been a part of a role play with Glasser or something like that, but whenever a teacher would come into him, Mr. How's it going? Oh my God, I can't do a thing with this Ricky. My guy is driving me crazy and pulling my hair out, And this guy's standard question was, what's your relationship with him? What do you mean? What's your personal relationship with him? I mean, and that was his starting point. There was, Ricky won't do his homework, he disrupts the class, what have you. Yeah, and of course what happens, Ricky is so detestable and non-attractive that the teacher avoids Ricky in every way imaginable. Is that Ricky there? Is that Ricky? Every way imaginable. The teacher wants nothing to do with Ricky. And Glasser would say, catch them in the act of doing something right. You ever talk with Ricky when he's outside the classroom, when he's not acting out? No, I leave him alone.
Okay. Thanks for all the info. Here's a little, we've been talking about relating, or relationships or whatever. Here is a poem by Ella Wheeler Wilcox that I think kind of goes hand in hand with what we've been discussing today. One ship sails east, one ship sails west, regardless of how the wind blows. It is the set of the sail and not the gale that determines the way we go. Like the winds of the sea and the waves of fate, as we voyage along through life, 'tis the set of the soul that determines its goal, and not the calm or the strife. And so it's the principles definitely of a lot of things, but primarily what we were looking at is reality therapy and choice theory, and how as we understand these principles and how effective they are, then the better our lives increase, and hopefully those that we have a little bit of say-so with or relating to. So thanks for being here, and many blessings to all.